Hello everyone, I am here before you to teach engineering physics having the subject code PH8151 which is based upon Anna University syllabus. The unit 1 here it deals with the properties of materials or properties of matter. So what is a matter? Actually all matter is composed of atoms, and this matter is categorized as solid, liquid and gas. What is a solid? Solid, it is a substance in which the atoms are closely packed, and in the case of liquids the atoms are loosely packed when compared to solids, and in the gases the atoms are more loosely packed when compared to the liquids. Apart from these three categories, we also have plasma and condensate, but these three play the major role. Of these three, we are going to study about one peculiar property of the solid material. It is called as elasticity, and this determines the strength of solids. What is meant by elasticity? It is the property by which a body resists the change in its size or shape when an external force is acting on it, and it returns to the original state after the removal of the deforming force. Now, what is a force? Suppose if a molecule consists of two atoms, we are going to consider a molecule consisting of two atoms. So when we stretch the molecule, or when we will pull out the atoms, it is called as stretching. It means that we are applying an external force, and this is otherwise called as deforming force. In order to resist this deforming force, each molecule or each atom inside the molecule will produce or will have an internal force called as restoring force. This restoring force is equal and opposite to the deforming force, or we can define like this. What is a force? It is something, or it is a physical quantity which is used to pull or push an object, or it produces a displacement of a particular object. So this is called as a force, and it is a physical quantity. Its unit is Newton. Now we can classify this elastic material into two types. One is elastic material or perfectly elastic material. These elastic materials, they will recover their original state after the removal of the deforming force. What is the other type? It is the plastic material, or it can be defined as non-elastic material. The materials which do not recover their original state even after the removal of deforming forces. It means that they are permanently set. We shall see the examples. Examples for elastic materials are rubber band. Next one is the spring, and these two, when we stretch them, they will try to come to the original state. So they are elastic material. See the third case, it is the knife. Now when we bend this knife, it snaps out, that is, it comes to the original state. Or we can say like this, steel is also one type of elastic material, but in order to make a deformation, or in order to set a deformation in this knife, we have to apply a large amount of stress, or we have to apply a large amount of force that we are going to see later. Then the second type material is plastic material. It is the non-elastic material. The examples are clay. This is China clay. It is used for making the toys, and this is the normal clay or putty. Okay, so now when these are molded, they will be permanently set and they will not regain their original state. So these are examples for plastic materials. So now in order to study about properties of matter, we need to study about some definitions. So first one is the load. What is a load? Whatever force we apply on the object, or any combination of the external force acting on the body whose net effect is to deform the body, that is to change its form or dimensions, it is referred as a load. The second definition is stress. it is always equal to force per unit area, and its unit is Newton per meter square. The third one is called as strain. It means change in dimension by original dimension. Dimension means we are going to change, we can change or we can alter the length or area or volume of the material. Now we are going to see about Hooke's law. What is Hooke's law? Actually, this law, it connects the stress and strain, or it relates this stress and strain, and it is only for and it holds good only for a particular limit. It is called as elastic limit. That is, it was found by the scientist called as Robert Hooke. He said that stress is directly proportional to strain within the elastic limit. So actual Hooke's law can be written as stress by strain equal to constant, and this constant is always equal to the modulus of elasticity, and this determines the elastic property of a particular material, or this value determines the elastic property of the material. So let us study what is meant by an elastic limit. We see here, when the forces are applied to the materials, each and every body has a tendency to oppose the force, and it will regain its original position after the removal of the force. This is the case of an elastic material. When the applied force is increased beyond the maximum value, the body does not regain its original position completely even after the removal of the external force. Hence, the maximum stress up to which a body can recover its original shape and size after removing the external force is called as elastic limit, and within this elastic limit, Hooke's law is obeyed. Now we are going to see about stress and its types in detail. So what is a stress? It is already defined as restoring force per unit area. Now stress can be divided into, usually it is divided into normal stress and shearing stress. Under this normal stress, there are two types, longitudinal stress and volume stress. And this longitudinal stress, it is categorized as tensile stress as well as compressive stress, and I have highlighted these three, and these three we are going to see in detail. So now first one, we are going to see about normal stress. Under this normal stress, we are going to see about longitudinal stress. We are going to consider a cylinder having a small length L, or we can say like this, initial length of the cylinder is taken as L. Now see here, consider a cylinder which we have to deform. If we apply the force perpendicular to the area of cross section, there will be a restoring force that develops in the cylinder in the opposite direction. That is, we are going to apply a force by tying a heavy box at the bottom of the cylinder. Now this the original length L, it is getting stressed by a displacement delta L due to the force applied for unit area. That is due to the stress applied. As there is a change in the length, that this type of stress is otherwise called as longitudinal stress. If we attach a box to the cylinder, the force is applied on the cross sectional area of the cylinder, due to which it is getting stressed, and we are getting increase in length. This is otherwise called as longitudinal stress. Here we can compress the length of the cylinder as well as stretch the length of the cylinder, or increase its length as well as decrease its length. So both are called as longitudinal stress, and they come under normal stress. See here, the types of longitudinal stresses. The first type is tensile stress. So what is tensile stress? Tensile stress, it is a longitudinal stress when the length of the cylinder is increased. So in this case, two forces equal and opposite to each other, they pull out the cylinder. So normally the cylinder is getting stretched and the length of the cylinder is getting increased. So this is the tensile stress. So what is compressive stress? So see here, the stresses, they act inside the through the cross sectional area of the cylinder, so they result in the decrease in length of the cylinder. Then second type is the shearing stress. This is otherwise called as tangential stress. So here the best example is piling up of coins. So when we pile up the coins one above the other, and when we give a small tilt, what happens to the shape of the arrangement? We will have a small change in the angle. This is actually called as shearing stress. Now I have taken a cuboid for my explanation. See here, here also we are going to apply a stress, that is restoring force per unit area when the force applied is parallel to the area of cross section of the body. In the case of normal stress, we applied a force perpendicular to the area of cross section of the body. In the case of shearing stress, just I am going to slide the arrangement of the object, or I am going to apply a force parallel to the area of cross section of the body. So relative displacement occurs between the opposite faces of the body. So I have taken here a cuboid form, and there is a formation of the angle theta because of the application of the stress parallel to the faces of the object. This is called as shearing stress. The third one is volume stress or hydraulic stress. This happens only in the homogeneous material. The volume stress, it is the restoring force per unit volume when the force is applied by a fluid on the object or a fluid on the body. I am going to immerse here a ball inside the sponge ball inside the water, in a tub of water. Due to pressure of water from all the directions, force acts on the ball. As a result, the ball seems to be slightly contracted. Because of the force exerted by the water, there is restoring force which develops in the ball, which is equal in magnitude to the force applied by the water, but it acts in the opposite direction. This is called as volume stress. Since this is an isotropic material, force equally acts on all the sides of the object. Since this is of spherical shape, external forces, they act on the rubber ball and change its dimension. This is the case of volume stress. Next we shall pass on to types of strain. First one is the longitudinal stress. Longitudinal strain, this is happened because of the application of longitudinal stress or lengthwise stress. Since we apply a deforming force along the length of the object, there is a change along the length of the object, or there is a change in the length of the object. Change in length to the original length of the body due to the longitudinal stress applied is otherwise called as longitudinal strain. If we apply longitudinal stress to the object, either the body elongates or it is compressed. That is, we can apply a tensile stress as well as compressive stress. All these types of stresses are called as longitudinal stress. So the corresponding strain is longitudinal strain. Longitudinal strain has a formula: change in dimension by original dimension. So what is the change in dimension here? There is a change along the length of the material. So we have written this as delta L divided by L. Delta L is the change in length and capital L is the original length of the material. And each and every strain has no dimension. It means that it has no unit. Then the second type is called as shearing strain. The very same example we have taken. We have taken a rectangular box. When it is given a shearing stress, it becomes a cuboid, or we can say like this: the shearing strain produced will be called as it will be usually taken as theta, because there is a change along the there is angular displacement. You see here we are going to consider a cube, rectangular box, or we can take it a cube itself, whose length is, initial length was L, which is at some position, and when it is getting displaced by an angle theta, there is a relative displacement called as delta x. That delta x I have written as x. So change in dimension is small x, original dimension is capital L. Altogether this ratio we are going to take as theta, and this is called as shearing strain. The third type is volume strain. Volume strain, this occurs because of the application of volume stress or hydraulic stress. The example we have taken is a cube, which is also an isotropic material. The very same formula we can apply here also. Change in volume by original volume is the formula. So volume strain equal to delta V divided by capital V. So then we can relate this stress and strain, and we can draw graphs. So for each and every material we can analyze its elastic behavior by drawing a graph or plotting a graph between different stresses applied to the material and the corresponding strain produced in it. So if we plot a graph between stress and strain, the diagram is called as stress strain diagram. Now a simple diagram we are going to study here. It is for the elongation of a wire. See here, we are going to divide this diagram into actually it is divided into 4 regions. Here I have written 5 regions. How these 5 regions came? See here, it starts from O. The graph, it starts from O, it goes to A, B, then C, then D, E and F. When we stretch a wire, we are giving applying a force, deforming force, or we pull out the wire. So more and more load is applied. The wire is getting elongated, and at the last or at the final step, it will approach a breaking point, and at that point it suffers fracture. So along the x-axis we have taken strain, and along the y-axis we have taken stress. This OA, it is called as elastic limit, and here the Hooke's law is obeyed. What is Hooke's law? It is stress by strain equal to constant, and this limit is otherwise called as proportional limit. This elastic limit as well as proportional limit are usually same. Beyond this limit, Hooke's law is disobeyed, slowly disobeyed, and the material enters into the plastic state. So next one is B. The point B here, this is also elastic limit, but beyond this A, there is a small change in the stress proportional to strain formula. Okay, so at this point the material starts to disobey Hooke's law. When we stretch the wire beyond this B, we will have yield points. Let us see what are yield points. Yield point is defined as the point at which the material starts to deform plastically. After this yield point, the material is no longer an elastic material. It enters the plastic region. Here the C is called as upper yield point and D is called as lower yield point. After this, the region is called as plastic region, and the material, it can never regain its original state. When we stress the material beyond this lower yield point D, we can say a point called as E. It is called as ultimate tensile stress. So what is ultimate tensile stress? It corresponds to the maximum stress that a material can sustain before fracture or failure, or it can withstand up to this point without any breakage. When we extend the material beyond this ultimate stress point, the material, it undergoes fracture or breaking, and this point F The point F is called as breaking point, and after this we will have two pieces of the material. This is the explanation of stress strain diagram of a simple wire. Now let us, the next topic we are going to study is about the modulus of elasticity and its types. The first type is called as next topic we are going to see in detail is modulus of elasticity. There are three types of moduli of elasticity. The first type here is Young's modulus, and this deals with the longitudinal stress and strain produced in the wire. See here, the actual formula for modulus of elasticity is stress by strain. So Young's modulus deals with the change in length because longitudinal stress is applied. We are going to write the formula here. What is the formula for longitudinal stress? F by A. Longitudinal strain is otherwise called as delta L divided by L. So when we rearrange this one, we will get a formula like this. Y is the notation for Young's modulus. Y equal to FL divided by delta L, and the strain has no dimension. So this Young's modulus, it takes the formula, or it takes the unit for stress, that is Newton per meter square, or otherwise it can be written as Pascal. Metals having comparatively greater Young's modulus are find major applications in industry. The second type is shear modulus, or this is otherwise called as rigidity modulus. This denoted by the letter G. This occurs because of the shearing stress applied. That is, again we have written it as we see here what is the formula for G, stress by strain, or it is written as shearing stress divided by shearing strain. So stress means force per unit area. Strain is, again it is called as theta, that is delta x by L, which is again equal to theta. So the total formula becomes F by A into theta. The third type is bulk modulus. This occurs because of the hydraulic stress or volume stress applied to the material and the corresponding hydraulic strain. So the formula bulk modulus is denoted as B, and it is usually written as minus P divided by, minus P means the pressure we are going to apply this written as hydraulic small p, that is pressure, Newton per meter square its unit, divided by hydraulic strain delta V by V. Negative sign shows that there is increase in pressure results in the decrease in volume. So when we apply a large pressure to the ball, it is getting contracted. So the dimensional change is different from other two cases. So we apply a minus here. So bulk modulus for solids is greater than liquids and gases. So this is the three types of so far we have studied about the types of moduli of elasticity. So using the value for bulk modulus, we can define another one quantity called as compressibility. It is equal to, or it is called as a reciprocal of bulk modulus. Mathematically it is written as 1 by B. So since this is the reciprocal of bulk modulus, compressibility of solids is very much smaller when compared to liquids and gases. That is, solids are less incompressible materials. Okay, the final topic we are going to study here is factors that affect the elastic materials, or factors affecting elasticity. The first factor is stress. When a material is subjected to large number of cycles of stresses, they lose their elastic property even within the elastic limit. More and more amount of stresses applied to a material cause its elastic property to be destroyed. This is the case. Then second factor is heat treatment. If annealing is made to a material, it results in the formation of large crystal grains, which ultimately reduces the elastic property of the material. Annealing means when we cool the material, uh, simply we can say like this, when we freeze the material, or when we say freeze, the water molecules will get ice, so we'll get large crystal grains. So this also affects the elastic property of the material, or it reduces the elastic property of the material. The third factor that is going to affect the elastic property is temperature. Normally elasticity increases with decrease in temperature and vice versa. Example here is, I have given lead. In the case of lead, the elastic property increases when the temperature is decreased. The fourth one is impurity. The increase and decrease of elastic property depends upon the what type of impurity we add to the material. When potassium is added to gold, elastic property of the gold material increases. But when carbon is added to molten iron, the elastic property of iron decreases, provided the carbon content should be more than 1% of iron. So in different cases, different impurities play a major role in decreasing or increasing the elastic property of the material. Crystalline structure. Fifth one is the crystalline structure. For a single crystal, the elasticity is more, but for an amorphous material or a polycrystalline material, the elasticity is less. The next concept we are going to study is about torsion pendulum. Let us see the examples for torsion. See the first diagram. Here an object is twisted such that two equal and opposite forces, they are acting along the upper and lower ends of the object, but in the opposite directions. So we can visualize a twist along the body of the object. Next, we shall come to the second one. Uh, when our clothes are wet, we need to squeeze them out. So a person squeezes the cloth. When we squeeze the cloth, we apply two equal and opposite forces, but they will be acting in the opposite directions. Or we can say like this: our right hand, it gives a clockwise force, but our left hand, whenever it gives a anti-clockwise force, we'll get a twist along the body of the object. So we are applying a tension such that the body of the object, it suffers a twist. How this twist is responsible for torsion of the object. So what is the reason for this torsion? How does this happen in an object in nature? So this is the reason. Torque is the reason. So actually, what is the torque? Moment of force is otherwise called as of torque. So what is moment of force? Any force value multiplied by a distance is otherwise called as a torque or moment of force. So whenever the distance is larger, the torque will be greater, or whenever the torque is greater, the twist will be greater, torsion is greater. So now let us see the examples for the moment of force or torque. Let us see one example for torque. We have already studied that whenever the distance is greater, whenever the distance or d is greater from the axis of rotation, whenever the distance is greater, this torque value will be high. So why this lock is placed here? Why it cannot be placed here? If you place it here, we cannot open the door easily. So whenever the distance is very greater, the door easily opens. This is the reason for the torque. That is torque equal to F into distance. So what is the name given for the application of two equal and opposite forces? So it is called as a couple. So we can see a box. How we can open the lid of the box? It's because of the application of two equal and opposite forces applied to the lid. See here, this is the force. It is directed in the negative x direction. This force is directed in the positive x direction. So whenever two forces they act in a system, they constitute a couple. So this couple is actually responsible for torsion or twist of the object along the axis of rotation. Now we are going to derive expressions for twisting couple of a wire. Now let us derive an expression for twisting couple on a wire. We are going to consider the wire. Usually the wire is in the form of a cylinder, so I have taken L to be the length of the wire. Here I have taken one thing, that is the upper end of the wire is clamped through a fixed support and the lower end is going to be free. The wire, it consists of a number of cylindrical tubes. Not only a single wire, it consists of many hollow wires or coaxial tubes are present inside a single cylinder. So we cannot take the constant radius for the cylindrical wire. So the radius of the tube ranges from 0 to a. Within this range, I have considered only one cylindrical shell for my analysis, whose radius is r. Cylindrical shell means we are going to have a hollow cylinder whose cross section will look like a circle. Since this cylindrical tube is hollow, let dr to be the thickness of the hollow cylindrical tube and r to be the radius of the uh, cylinder we have taken for analysis. Now we are going to apply a twist from the lower end of the wire. So along the axis, there will be a lower twist or lower strain will be present. A low amount of deformation will be present along the axis of the rotation of the wire. But along the rim of the cylinder, there will be a larger amount of shearing strain because of the twist we have applied. Now let us go into the derivation. So this is the elementary tube we have taken. Let O dash be the axial length of the cylinder, which is taken as small l. We have considered AC to be parallel to this axis. After twist, this wire, it suffers an angle theta, and because of this angular twist, this wire, it suffers a strain called as phi, that is a twist along the center of the wire. So now the shearing strain is going to be larger only along the rim of the cylinder. In this elementary tube, in the twisted state, this COC is equal to twisting angle theta, and also C C1 equal to phi, which is again equal to shearing strain. We can multiply this to L phi, this will be equal to CC1. Let's go. Now see here CC1 again, but CC1 is equal to R theta from the third equation. This is the cylinder. This is the cylindrical tube we have taken for our analysis. O dash is taken as the axis of the cylinder. This L is the axial length of the cylinder. If you apply a couple or if you apply a force to the bottom free end of the cylindrical wire, since this upper end is clamped, we are going to apply a twist through the lower end of the wire. This is angle theta. So CC1, how we can write this? R is the radius of the wire, as well as theta is the angle. So CC1 equal to R into theta. And also the rim of the wire, it suffers a larger strain or deformation because of the angular twist. So this phi is taken as the shearing strain. So we can write the CC1 as this L means AC is parallel to OO1. So L into phi is also equal to CC1. Since CC1 has two values, that is R into theta and L into phi. CC1 can be visualized from here also. CC1, this lower part is enlarged here. So CC1 is equal to R into theta. From the second diagram, we can visualize the CC1 is equal to L into phi. See, both from this, we can find out what is phi. This is done in the following steps. So we are calculating what is phi. Phi equal to, when CC1 equal to R into theta, that is equal to L into phi. So we can write this phi as R theta by L. Then we have shearing strain in our hand. Now we need to find out what is the shearing stress. First we have to calculate shearing strain. Second calculation is shearing stress. So how can we calculate shearing stress? From the modulus of elasticity, rigidity modulus. That is, we are having an angular twist. So we take rigidity modulus. This is equal to eta. Eta is equal to shear stress by shear strain. Shearing stress is equal to, again equal to eta into shearing strain. So we can write this as eta into phi. We substitute the value for phi. So we have stress is equal to eta or theta divided by L. Now we need to calculate what is the force. What is the force? From this stress we need to calculate what is the force. So for the calculation of force, so what is the formula that relates the stress and the force? Stress equal to force divided by area. So we are going to calculate the force in the next step. So first is the calculation of shearing strain. Second one, calculation of shearing stress. Third one, calculation of shearing force. So we need to take the cross-sectional area of the elementary tube. Since we have taken the cylinder, this is the cross-sectional area 2 pi r into the thickness dr. Now the shearing force equal to stress into area. So what is stress? Eta r theta divided by L into this cross-sectional area. Multiply them both. So we will have 2 pi eta theta by L r square dr. So next, then fourth calculation is moment of force. So what is moment of force? It is force into distance or displacement. So what is the displacement? It is r, that is our radius of the coaxial cylinder. So 2 pi eta into theta divided by L r square dr into r. So we'll have 2 pi eta theta divided by L into r cube dr. So this is the moment of the force about the axis of the tube. We have considered as only a small segment. The range of the we have already said that the radius, it ranges from 0 to a. So for in order to find out the moment of force for the whole wire, we need to integrate this expression from 0 to a. So we are going to do it now. So the next step is the integration of the above equation from 0 to a. So all these values are constant. R cube dr is the only variable. So r cube, when we integrate, we will have r power 4 divided by 4. So apply the limits from 0 to a. So you'll have 2 pi eta theta by L into a power 4 by 4. So alright. So right. Then we can simplify this as C, that is twisting couple for the whole wire, is written as C is equal to pi eta r power 4 theta by 2L. This is the expression for twisting couple of the whole wire. But for unit twist, that is, whenever the twisting angle theta is equal to 1 radian, we can substitute for this theta as 1 units. So now the next step is twisting couple per unit twist of the wire. So we have substituted for theta equal to 1. So C is equal to pi eta r power 4 by 2L. So this is the final value for twisting couple per unit width of the cylindrical wire. Suppose if we have considered the inner radius as R1 and the outer radius as R2. That is, there we have used the limits from 0 to A. So, but if this is the range for our calculation, so what will be our case? Just you apply this value, these values are constant. Already x power 4 by 4 is the integral value. So for this x power 4, when you apply these limits, you will have pi eta theta by 2l into r2 power 4 minus r1 power 4. So this is the final value for twisting couple of the wire. Couple per unit twist of the wire. This is a special case whenever the radius differs. The next one we are going to study is about torsion pendulum. Torsion pendulum consists of a rigid support from which a metal small thin wire is attached on one end, and to its free end a circular disc is attached, and this disc is set into torsional oscillations, or this is turned such that there is a twist along the axis of the wire. During the last uh, derivation, we have seen the expression for couple per unit width of the wire. Now we are going to perform torsional oscillations. For each and every oscillation, we can find out the time period. So we are not having any type of cylindrical masses placed on the circular disc. So when we perform the torsional oscillation, and we need to calculate the time period using the stop clock, and this time period will have the expression T naught is equal to 2 pi root of I naught divided by C. So what is I naught? I naught is called as the moment of inertia of the disc about the axis of the wire, and solely depends upon the mass of the disc alone. Now you square this expression T naught square equal to 4 pi square I naught divided by C. This is the first case. Then we are going to keep two small masses symmetrically on either sides of the axis of the circular disc at a distance d1 and d1. This d1 is very closer to the axis of the wire. This is of smaller distance. So now using this in addition to this circular disc, we are having two masses, each having the weight as 200 grams. Now we perform torsional oscillations and calculate the time period as T1 is equal to 2 pi root of I1 divided by C. This I1, it includes the moment of inertia of the disc as well as the moment of inertia of these two weights we have used. So we need to calculate the moment of inertia I1 using the parallel axis theorem. Its value can be written as I naught, which is the moment of inertia of this disc, and small I is called as the moment of inertia of the uh, each small masses. And since we have two masses, we multiply the whole value by 2, and m into d1 square is usual calculation for moment of inertia. For each distance d1 we need to calculate. Since we have two masses, we have written this 2 here. So when you substitute this I1 in the above expression, we'll have T1 square equal to 4 pi square by C I naught plus 2I plus 2M D1 square. Then we need to repeat the experiment by placing the two cylindrical masses on the extreme ends of the circular disc with a distance d2. So this d2 is greater than d1. So here also we need to calculate the moment of inertia I2 using the parallel axis theorem. It possesses the value I naught plus 2I plus 2m d2 square. So we have calculated T2 square equal to 4 pi square by C into I naught plus 2I plus 2m d2 square. So in our hand we have T naught square, T1 square, T2 square. So we need to find out what is the ratio for T naught square by T2 square minus T1 square. We need to find out this ratio first. So T2 square minus T1 square is found as follows. So T1 from T2 square is subtract T1 square. We'll have 4 pi square by c I2 minus I1. So what is minus I2? It is equal to I0 plus 2i plus 2m d2 square. Then minus this I1, this whole value is I1. I0 and 2i are getting cancelled. So we'll have 4 pi square by c into 2m into d2 square minus d1 square. So when you find out the ratio t naught square by t2 square minus t1 square, you'll have I naught by I2 minus I1. This I2 minus I1 is again equal to 2m into d2 square minus d1 square. You arrange this expression, rearrange this expression and get the value for moment of inertia of the circular disc. This depends upon t1 square, t2 square, and t1 square, and also the distances t1 and d2. So far we have calculated the moment of inertia of the circular disc. Then using this formula we need to calculate what is the rigidity modulus. Here you need to take the expression t2 square minus t1 square equal to 4 pi square by c. C, for this c we need to substitute the couple per unit twist. Pi eta r power 4 by 2l is substituted. Then you rearrange this formula, get the value for eta. This will give you the expression for rigidity modulus of the wire. So the rearranged value for eta is 16 pi ml by r power 4 d2 square minus d1 square divided by t2 square minus t1 square. The unit is Newton per meter square. This value it extremely depends upon r, since this is present in the denominator as r power 4. R means radius of the wire. This is all about the applications of torsion pendulum. In addition to the calculation of value for moment of inertia of the circular disc and the rigidity modulus of the wire, this torsion pendulum have many applications. We can find out the moment of inertia for the regular objects also. Instead of having the circular disc, we can find out the moment of inertia for unknown shaped objects. Now we shall pass on to bending of beams. First, initially we are going to calculate what is the bending moment of a beam. Let us take a small scale, and it can be bent. It can be bent either on both sides. When we apply a force to both sides, it will be bent in the form of arc of a circle. Suppose for a longer scale, when you apply a force at the center, it will be bent in this direction. Or if you fix this side and you bend on the other side, you will have a bent on the one of the sides of the beam. So this is called as bending of beams. We are going to calculate what is the bending moment. Moment is nothing but the force into displacement value. So we are going to consider a small segment on the bent beam. On our bent scale, wooden scale, we have considered a small portion A, B, C, D. So this is drawn in an enlarged form. So ABCD is the form, and we have considered only a small segment, that is this line is called as neutral axis, and it does not suffer any deformation, but at the rims or at the edges there will be deformation. On one side there will be tension because of the bending, and on the lower side there will be compression. Okay, so now going to the derivation, P and Q are the 2 points on the neutral axis, M and R is taken to be the radius of curvature. Because of this bending, we can imagine this to be the arc of a circle. So if you extend this arc, you will have a circle with center O. So this length is taken as R, capital R, radius of curvature from O to the element we have considered. And the theta is taken to be the imaginary angle subtended by the bent beam at its center of curvature, and this POQ is equal to theta. So already we have explained this POQ is taken as theta. So now let us consider another 2 points which is above this PQ, that is P1 and Q1, which is at a distance of x from the neutral axis. So now we are going to calculate what is the stress because of the bending of beams. So first let us consider the increase in length. So how this length of the scale is increased because of bending, we are going to calculate. That is, we are going to subtract this P1 Q1 from P1 Q1 minus PQ, we are going to find out, and we are going to find out the stress value for the bending of beams initially. So what is P1 Q1? P1 Q1 is equal to R plus X into theta. So how it is R plus X into theta? R is from this Q to O, it is equal to R. From this P to O, it is equal to R. So then what is X? This is the extra distance. So what is the X? This is extra distance. This is the extra distance. Okay. So R plus X. So this R plus X equal to, so P1 Q1 equal to R plus X into theta. PQ is equal to R into theta. You find out the increase in length. Just you subtract and write out the answer. So strain produced is what? Increase in length by original length. Original length is R into theta, and increase in length is X into theta. So the value we have is X by R. So this is called as linear strain. So using the linear strain, we are going to find out what is the stress. So if there is increase in length, we can find out what is the Young's modulus, y equal to linear stress by linear strain. So from this formula we can write down what is linear stress. This linear stress equal to y into capital Y into linear strain. That is linear strain we have calculated to be x by r, substitute it here. Now let us calculate the bending moment. So bending moment means force into area. We have stress in our hand. So stress equal to force by area. So that we are going to write here. So force equal to area into stress is going to be our formula. So what is stress? It is here yx by r into area is delta A, which is the area of the small portion, that is P1 Q1 PQ portion we have considered for our analysis. Plus the area of cross section delta A. So multiply this by area. So the moment of, next one we are going to calculate the moment of force. So force into perpendicular distance is called as moment. So what is the distance? Perpendicular distance is what? Along the axis of the wire, there is an increase in the length of the radius of curvature. Okay, so now this is the increase in length. This is the axis of the wire. So this is the perpendicular distance. Already we have taken this as x. So multiply this by x value. So y into delta A x square by r. So sum of the moments of forces acting on all the layers will be the integral value for the whole scale. So we are going to, we have to integrate or we have to sum up. Instead of integrating, we are going to put one summation sign. So summation y is taken out because this is Young's modulus, summation delta A x square. This is called as geometrical moment of inertia. This is specific for a particular object. So this is the moment of inertia value, delta A into x square, delta A into x square, summation delta A into x square equal to Ig, which is called as a geometrical moment of inertia of the cross section of the beam. So the final step is, so instead of calling this as bending a moment, we are going to call this as internal bending moment. The value is yig divided by r. Then we can say this value y into ig is called as flexural rigidity. This gives a measure of the resistance of the beam to the bending. So we can have special cases. In the case of the rectangle, uh, there are two dimensions b and d. Okay, horizontal length, vertical length, or length into breadth. So the geometrical moment of inertia value is calculated to be b d cube by 12. Substitute this value in the above expression, get the answer. And for a circular cross section, Ig value is pi r power 4 by 4. For different cross sectional values, for different shapes, we have different moment of inertia values. So for different shapes of whenever we vary the shapes of the objects, the same shapes of the lamina, we can have different values for internal bending moment. Using the value for bending moment, we are going to study about the calculation of Young's modulus of bending of beams. So first thing is cantilever. So what is the definition for cantilever? It is actually a beam fixed at one of the ends and it is loaded at the free end. So such a type of beam is otherwise called as a cantilever. Now we are going to consider a cantilever having the length small l fixed at the end A and loaded at the end B by the weight W. The end B is depressed and AB is taken to be the neutral axis. So initially the beam is along this line, so AB is the neutral axis. Now we are going to apply a load to the B end, so it is getting depressed. So the new value B dash occurs here. So B dash is otherwise called as vertical depression value. Now, consider the section of the cross wire P at a distance of x from the free end A. So, we are going to take this PQ to be the element for analysis. The PQ is distance is taken to be dx and the vertical depression. So, whenever the beam it is depressed on one of its sides, there will be horizontal values as well as horizontal increase in length as well as vertical increase in length. So vertical increase in length is taken to be dy, horizontal increase in length is taken to be dx, and this resembles the arc of the circle, and uh, it subtends the arc of the circle. So we have a radius of curvature capital R. So if the whole length is equal to L and if x is to be the constant distance of the element considered from the fixed end x, so remaining distance is what? Whole length L minus this value. So we have written this as L minus x, and this angle is small, and we have taken this angle to be d theta. So if this is theta, this is also equal to d theta. So first we need to write the bending moment value. First initially we have calculated in internal bending moment Yig by R or Yi by R simply. And now we need to calculate here external bending moment also. How does this occur? Because of the application of weight at the free end B. So W is the weight applied. Uh, we have applied the weight W into PB dash. That is how much this is how much the scale is bent, this value L minus x. So why this value? Force into perpendicular distance is called as moment. So what is the force here? Moment equal to force means this one, this weight has direction, this is actually equal to m into m into g, that is mass into acceleration due to gravity, that is equal to force into L minus x. So in order to maintain equilibrium, these two moment values which should be equal. So external bending moment equal to internal bending moment. So we equate these two and we need to calculate. We need to in the equilibrium position we need to calculate, we need to equate these two values, and we are going to calculate dx by dy. Dx by dy is what is dx? From the diagram, next step is to the calculation of dx divided by dy. is dx, r into d theta is dx. This dy, this is also d theta, and this value, this length is equal to L minus x into d theta. So dx by dy can be written as r d theta by L minus x into d theta. So d theta cancelled, r by L minus x. So from this you find out what is radius of curvature. Radius of curvature value is equal to L minus x into dx divided by dy. Now we need to substitute this r value. Thus, now we need to substitute this value for r in our first equation. This is the first equation. So see the first equation. Substitute the value for r here, yi by what is r. So this is done as the next step. W into L minus x into yi by r is substituted. Then you rearrange and get the value for small dy. Dy is equal to y. Dy is the vertical displacement. So dy is equal to, that is the, from this we are going to calculate what is the depression. Y into L minus x the whole square into dx divided by y into I. So for the whole beam, we need to integrate this expression from 0 to L, which is the length of the scale. So you just integrate, W by yi is constant, and L minus x the whole square should be expanded first, a minus b the whole square form. So I have expanded this here. So just we are having, we need to integrate like this, L square dx. So L square into x plus x square, integral x square is what? X cube by 3. And here we have 2L x square by 2. So this is written here. Apply the limits and then L cube and L cube getting cancelled. So answer is WL cube by 3yi. Okay, we have found the answer for depression of the cantilever. From this capital Y is the Young's modulus. From this we can calculate what is the Young's modulus. This I value, it varies for different dimensions. So for rectangle, this I equal to BD cube by 12. And for the circular cross section, it is equal to pi r power 4 by 4. So for we have calculated this value for rectangle cross section. Substitute y w is equal to m into g, that is mgl cube by, substitute in this formula, 3 instead of 5 bd cube by 12, and small y. So we rearrange and get this formula. Y is equal to 4 mg L cube by BD cube small y. This is the Young's modulus value calculated from the cantilever experiment. The next thing we are going to see is about non-uniform bending. This can be calculated easily from the cantilever theory. Using the cantilever theory, we are going to calculate the Young's modulus value for beam by non-uniform bending method. So we'll initially see what is non-uniform bending. So if the beam is loaded at its midpoint, the depression produced does not form the arc of a circle. So you see here, we are going to take a scale and we are going to apply a force at the center. So it is bent in this line. Along this line it is bent. So at the center there is a depression. So consider a uniform cross-section area AB of length L arranged horizontally on two knife edges K1 and K2 near the ends A and B. So see here. So if we apply a load W at the center, actually this is bent like this. It is not in the form of an arc circle, but it suffers a depression at the center. So if this is equal to W, two equal and opposite forces should act along the uh, upper side. So only this scale is balanced. So this W is divided as W by 2 and W by 2 on both sides, both ends A and B. So we can find out easily. So what is the expression for depression in the case of cantilever? WL cube by 3IY, 3IY. So we can write this expression as instead of W we are going to write as W by 2, and instead of L we are going to write as L by 2, because L is divided as since we have loaded at the center, this is taken as L by 2, and then you substitute it. So W by 2 into L cube by 8 divided by 3IY. So in the next step you will get the answer. WL cube by 48 IY. Now we are using a rectangular cross. Suppose if you use a scale, long scale. So now the moment of inertia is BD cube by 12. So you substitute it here, get the answer for Young's modulus. The value is mgl cube by 4 BD cube y Newton per meter square. So far we have studied the theory, and now the actual experiment is present here. The beam is bent at the center. The depression is the beam suffers from depression at the center. On both the ends A and B, we have kept two knife edges for support. A weight hanger is suspended and a pin is fixed vertically at the midpoint, and we have to focus the pin using the microscope. The initial reading on the vertical scale of the microscope is taken. Here the pin is present, we need to focus this using the microscope. The readings are taken from the vertical scale on the microscope. Suitable mass, so a mass we have to add at the center. For varying mass we have varying amounts of depressions. So finally we will calculate the depression using this tabular column. That is, we are adding the weights in terms of 50 grams. First we need to increase the loads and take down the readings in the microscope scale, vertical scale, and then we have to decrease from the lower value. From the last value we need to decrease till the first one. Then we need to take the mean, and this gives us the depression value for the load we have applied at the center. So this is the experiment. So when after calculating the depression we need to substitute it here, and and we need to find out the Young's modulus. M is the mass, mg is the weight we have applied at the center, that is mg. Lambda here it is L is written as lambda here, mg L cube by 4 BD cube, small y is the depression we have calculated from the experiment. This is non-uniform bending experiment. Next thing we are going to see is uniform bending. So it is uniform bending where we have taken the same scale and we have loaded at both the ends of the scale. So the scale it suffers actually elevation. So along these two ends we are going to keep the knife edges, and we need to keep a pin at the center and focus the pin using the microscope. We have added weights on both the sides of the scale. So the segment CD we have considered distance is taken as L. So here also we need to find out the same one. We have the internal bending moment value as yi by r. We need to calculate what is the external bending moment. External bending moment means we need to we are going to take this value as a. So if this is the force, or if this is the force we have applied, the perpendicular distance is equal to a from the center. From this to this side, this is equal to a. So W into A is taken to be external bending moment value. And then in equilibrium position, external bending moment equal to internal bending moment. These two should be equated such that the system is balanced. Now when you visualize this diagram, This resembles the arc of a circle. This resembles the arc of a circle, and we can subtend it at the center. So if we enlarge this diagram, we can draw a circle having the segment we have considered is CD. At these two ends, we have kept the knife edges. To whole length is L. So when we divide this equally, we'll have L by 2 on both sides. Then if we consider this to be this arc is extended to be a circle, center O, and total length is taken to be 2R. 2r is the diameter of the circle. 2r minus this y. This is called as elevation. So if this is y, elevation is y, the remaining distance from the total diameter value 2r minus y is the remaining distance. So using the chord of the circle, we can write this as L by 2 into L by 2 is equal to. So this is calculated here. L by 2 into L by 2 equal to 2r minus y into y. So we can easily simplify this as, since y is very small, it is elevation small, we can measure this using the microscope. So this can be neglected. Y square can be neglected. So 2yr is equal to L square by 4. So y equal to L square by r. So we can calculate from this expression, we can calculate 1 by r equal to 8y by L square. Substitute, when we substitute this value in the balanced form of our equation, that is third equation, this one, 1 by, instead of this 1 by r, we are going to substitute here. W is equal to into into 8y by L square. So from this we can calculate easily the elevation, and when the elevation is calculated, we have Young's modulus here. When we rearrange this expression, we have WA into L square by 8IY. So W is equal to M into G. So this I, it varies for different dimensions. Usually we take the scale. So I is equal to BD cube by 12 is the formula. Substitute it here, get the answer. So this is the answer. So when you substitute BD cube by 12, you have W is equal, Y is equal to 3 by 2 mg AL square by BD cube Y. This is the expression for Young's modulus, which is calculated using uniform bending. So far we have studied three types of methods in bending of beams. First one is cantilever, second one is non-uniform bending, and the third or final one is uniform bending. So this is the uniform bending experiment. This very same procedure is repeated here. Pin is placed at the center, and we need to focus the tip of the pin using the microscope after the application of load. And this load is varied in terms of 50 grams. So this very same tabular column we are going to see. The load is added first and taken, and the readings are taken from the vertical scale of the microscope, and we have to decrease till the W value. Then we have to find out the value for depression. Then we need to substitute this uh, depression value here in the formula. 3 by 2 mg AL square. L is the length. We can calculate the distance CD, that is B is the breadth, and D is the thickness. Usually breadth of the scale is measured using the vernier caliper, and thickness of the scale measured using the screw gauge device. So after substituting all the values, one can find out the Young's modulus of the material of the beam. So this is uniform bending method. The last one is I-shaped girder. What is a girder? A girder is a metallic beam supported at its two ends by pillars on opposite walls. Should be so designed that it should not bend too much or break under its own weight. Consider a girder is to be supported at its two ends. So a girder, it is a metallic beam actually supported by at its two ends by the pillars. So we are going to study about I-shaped pillars. I-shaped girders. We have seen them on the bridges. The center part is very much bigger, such that it can withstand heavy weights. The non-uniform bending technique and the depression at the center of the beam, it does not get it does not get easily depressed. But whenever there is depression, we can calculate them using the non-uniform bending formula. Y is equal to mgl cube by 4bd cube y. Hence, to reduce the bending for a given load, the Young's modulus y of the material should be large and b and d of the beam should be large. So we need to get a small amount of bending. So if this value is to be smaller, b, d, y, all of them should be larger. So breadth, thickness, as well as Young's modulus value are larger such that there is no bending at the center of the beam. So these are called as I-shaped girder, and the center part is very much bigger since it possesses the shape of I, alphabet I. This is called as I-shaped girder. So at sometimes this beam it suffers from buckling. So what is meant by buckling? Uh, Suppose if we increase the thickness, the beam may bend at sometimes, since because B and D they should balance each other. So if this is not possible, there will be bending of beams. So at the center of the I shape there will be a bending. So this is called as buckling of the beam. So, how to prevent buckling? The beam is designed such that it can sustain heavy loads. Hence, the beam is designed to have a large thickness to minimize bending and a large load-bearing surface to prevent buckling. The shape, actually, the I shape, it satisfies all these conditions. No other shape satisfies this condition. So, the beam it takes the shape of the alphabet I. We can see some of the features of I-shaped girder. As layers of the beam at the upper and the bottom are subjected to maximum stress, more material must be needed there to withstand the strain. Second one is, as the stress around the neutral layer is very small, usually the neutral axis does not suffer from deformation. Drilling these layers can be removed without loss of efficiency. This would have actually this would save our economy, and the cost of the material of the girder will not be very much higher if the center part is very big. We can save our economy. These are all about the features of I-shaped girder. I thank every one of you for listening the class. We shall meet again in the next video.